All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here to The Full Story on WYAB 103.9. As I'm now joined here by I can't ever get it right, by Rachel Kerr Schneider, the author of the book The Widow Chose Red. And am I saying that right? I'm going to make sure I emphasize the question mark because I think it is a great question. But Rachel, thank you for joining us here this morning.
Matthew, thank you. And hello to you and Mississippi. I was there just a couple of weeks ago, and it's as hot here in Dallas, Texas, as it is in Mississippi.
Yeah, it's a different kind of hot though, right? Because it's like here it's so humid, and over there it's like 110 degrees there, but here it's just like that 100% humidity, as you know, growing up here.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you look lovely, by the way, as well.
Oh.
And thank you for joining us here on the live stream, including here on the radio. So, like I said, you are actually from Jackson, or grew up in Jackson, Mississippi.
I did actually. I mean, I was born in Pensacola, but my family had a business there, Yazoo Lawnmowers, and so my dad came back to run the business, and that's where I grew up. I graduated from Callaway High School. Go Chargers!
Okay, that's what I was about to ask you. What high school did you go to?
I'm sorry. Say that again.
I was just about to ask you what high school you went to. So
what high school? Yeah, Callaway High School. It's still there. I was part of the Gay First program. The Gay for Girls had a modeling board there. I was very involved with that. I went to Broadmoor Baptist Church. I also went to Christ Lutheran Church. I grew up there. I still have family there. Actually, I just had an uncle who's just been recently diagnosed with ALS, and so I had a minute to visit with him while I was in Jackson just a few weeks ago. I was there for a funeral of a very close friend. So Jackson to me is just, it will always be home. And I have very, very good memories of growing up there. And, they say you can never go home again.
Right.
It changes. It does change. But, the memories are always there. My dad's business was sold. He's in Australia now. My mom and dad are in Australia.
They're still in Australia. I saw that in the book. They're still in Australia.
Yes, they are, and still doing outdoor power equipment. So,
really?
it still stays. It's still part of the family. It's in the family DNA, that kind of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so let's get into the book. So again, the Widow Chose Red: My Journey with Jesus, John, and ALS. So I just want to talk. I said it's sort of like the book itself. It's sort of a memoir, but also what I really like about it has these little reflections at the end of each section or each chapter, I guess. So it's kind of a memoir with the addition of some self-help or to how to improve people or give them advice about this. So it's kind of a best of both worlds there. Was that kind of your intention?
Yes, very much so, because as you mentioned in the intro, this is very much a faith journey. And I know that all of us are thrown things in our life that are unexpected and unimaginable circumstances. And even when we grow up with faith and we know who Jesus is and we've gone to church, we will find ourselves kind of going, what's going on here? What am I supposed to learn here? Why is this so hard? And so I wanted to also provide some of the things that I was thinking about as I was going through this journey, and also give maybe some tangible, actionable items that could help if you find yourself going through a difficult season in your life.
Yeah, and when you were going through this, and we'll get into more detail about it in just a second, but were there books that you had? I mean, obviously the Bible, but was there other books that you kind of relied on during that time?
Well, I will tell you, my youngest, Jake, I was actually doing a book report on Heaven is for Real. And
Okay.
so, the concept of heaven and, how all of that plays into, and when you're young like that, my boys were so young. They were 10 and 14 when their dad actually died. So they were actually younger when he got diagnosed. So books for me, I can't say that I had a lot of time to read while I was taking care of John. But what I did do a lot of was I listened to a lot of things on my phone, a lot of sermons, a lot of scripture. And so those were things that I used to fortify the messaging that I needed to get me through.
Yeah, and I will say it was such a great forward by Patty Albury. Of the I think she wrote Chicken Soup for the Christian Soul. Great author. I mean, it was such wonderful words that she wrote for you. How did you meet her? How did you guys just knew each other in the circles, or?
Well, actually, it's a great story. So Patty works with Jack Canfield. They co-created the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, and I actually was invited to attend a retreat where
Mm-hmm.
Jack was speaking and training, and that's where I met Patty, and that was over. I think it was right after John died that I went to this retreat, because at that time I really wanted to, write the book. I really wanted to build a platform. I really wanted to minister to women. And so I thought, okay, this is where I'm going to go. And what I found, though, Matthew, is that God had another plan, because it's been 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally have gotten the book out. The second book will detail what it was like to raise my boys. And that's kind
Yeah,
of what happened to me
really.
in the gap, was that I had to say, wait a
Mm.
second, these boys need a full-time parent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Okay, I just want to talk a little bit because, like I said, it's a great. One thing about memoirs is that you kind of always know the ending, right? It's before you even get to it, right? So it's like, ah, man, it's like you know the ending when it's like right there in the beginning. But it's such interesting stories, and one of the things. So I used, as many of the listeners know, I used to be an automotive journalist. So I wrote and reviewed cars, and so someone's car history is very interesting to me. And hearing about your cut, or first your MG midget, I think that you had here in Mississippi, which
Yes.
resonates with me because I have a little Miata. I've had multiple Miatas, so
Okay.
I really love them. But and then I think your T-top Cutlass.
Yes.
When you and John were moving from Dallas to Pennsylvania, uh,
Yes.
that car. I mean, I guess it was kind of comfortable going cross country in it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing for me, right, was that it was supposed to be Miss Alabama's car, and she didn't want it. So
Yeah, that's
I was
right.
like, wow, I'm a frustrated wannabe beauty queen, but I'll take her car. So and yeah, the MG was hilarious, because I think I write in the book about how my youngest brother Sean ran in the
Mhm.
car going, "There's a midget outside, there's a midget outside." And I'm like,
I know.
you can't say that. You can't talk like
You're
that. And
little
then
people. You can't say that.
yeah, you can't do that. And I didn't know, and I still don't know to this day much about cars, Matthew. So I think
Yeah,
it's hilarious that that would be one of the things that you would key in on,
yeah, yeah.
because yeah,
Well, people's car history is interesting. It kind of tells people almost relate their lives to the cars they had in that circumstance,
right.
right? Whether you're a car person or not, it's like, I mean, during that time of my life, I had this crappy car, or I had this car, and how you weave it in. You know how John, bought you that brand new Honda Accord,
Yeah.
um, right after you get to Pennsylvania.
Oh yeah. He was so done with the Cutlass. And that car's not built for ice or snow
No,
or
no,
any of that stuff. No.
you'd be sliding around.
Yes.
Um, well, like I said in the beginning, like you said, it's really interesting because I mean, you talk about moving around with your husband and with his corporate career, moving up in different companies, and one thing as a lot of people know, I was in the army for several years, and we worked a lot with with families. Families in the military are always
Mhm.
moving. It's hard for spouses to be able to. They have to move almost every 2 years. Sometimes
Mhm.
you get a third year, but sometimes it's every 2 years. And I think it's really good in your memoir about how you're every time you go to a new place, and it was crazy amount of different places. You're going from California to Minnesota to Pennsylvania to back to Texas, several times back to Texas.
Yes.
How you talk about how you had some depression at of some of that, and that we're still, and how you're still able to look for that light and still try to find the job. What kind of motivated you during all those kind of different moves?
Well, it's easy to do when you have kids, because your
Yeah,
kids force you to get involved with school and
yeah,
sports and those things. But John and I didn't have kids for 10 years, and we did a lot of relocation in that time. And so it really gave me one of the things I did is I pursued some of my interests. He tried to get me to like golf. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. But he
yeah.
tried to get me to like golf. We bought bikes and did the whole, biking thing.
Mhm.
I didn't stick with that either. I went to cooking classes and did those kinds of things. So I really had to try and find those things that were going to bring me joy. And people know too, even just the simple things, finding somebody to do your hair, finding the right grocery store, right? Because we have certain ways that we like to shop, and finding a church,
Mhm.
and those things you have to be intentional about, and sometimes you really don't want to. And then of course, making friends. And what we know is if we're going to have a relationship with anyone, it can take time.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we just don't like, right? We live in an instant gratification world where, okay, we should be able to decide in a snap, okay,
Mhm.
they're going to be our friend, or blah, 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 blah. And I will tell you, coming from the family that I came from, depression was not something that you readily acknowledged. We,
Mhm.
we don't talk about it. My dad, like you, was in the military.
Mhm.
Who has time to be depressed? You
Yeah.
got stuff to do, right?
Right.
And then get treated for it. Go see a therapist. No, you should be able to fix that yourself. So I will tell you that, very early on, I made a decision that I needed some additional help. And my husband, he was watching me, and he didn't know how to help me. I mean, me looking for a job or trying to, but so I started seeking out some counseling very early on, and realized that if I was going to assimilate into a new community, I was going to have to put myself out there,
Absolutely.
and sometimes and I was going to have to put myself out there maybe more than once,
Yes, ma'am.
believe it or not.
Absolutely. Looks like we got a caller coming in here. They may have a question for you, Rachel, if you don't
Okay,
mind taking a call.
sure.
Um, all right, you're on the full story. Can you hear me? Well, they're on the phone. This is the thing about live radio, folks. If you're gonna call in, you're there. Hello, going once, going twice, and that's it. All
And
right.
they're
Well, that
gone.
was great. And they're gone. Well, they had the idea. Um,
Yes, they may try again. Who
That's
knows?
right. That's right. But so what, like I said, what advice would you give to, like I said, especially a lot of women who are having to move around, and I think especially in today's world where it seems like, it's almost looked down upon for someone to follow their spouse's careers. Like, what are you doing? And I think it was really good. You talk about how it's a gift that you're giving, which I
Mhm.
think was a great way. But what advice would you give a lot of these young women that would be in the same circumstance you, who are trying to make their way or trying to follow their husbands in their careers around the country?
I would say, social media is very different now than it was when I was going through all this. You can basically find a group in your neighborhood or in your city, a mom's group, or single gals, or whatever it might be, to connect. That's a first step. I would also say too that, yeah, church is usually the first place that I would gravitate to, finding that place with like-minded people, and knowing too that there are always social things that are going on there. It's not easy. And of course, the kids, as I mentioned earlier, that's always an easy way. But I will tell you, even when I relocated with Jake to Texas
Mhm.
10 years ago, um, sometimes the community has already established, these people have grown up with each other, their kids and everything else. It can be difficult, but don't give up, persevere. You will find, and here's the thing, you never know where it might be that you're going to meet that one person
Yeah.
that you're going to really connect with, and really be able to build. Um and you just kind of have to treat it like it's a scavenger hunt, right? Well, who
Yeah.
am I going to meet today? Where am I going to meet them? Is it the
Yeah.
grocery store, or where might it be?
Yeah, and like I said, you talk about that in your book about all the different places and the friends that you would make, and sometimes in unlucky circumstances. I know you talked a lot about Paula, who ended up becoming a really good family friend, but all these people that you just sometimes meet in the most interesting of places, and you talk about in your book, and so it's a really good. Like I said, that's a part of the book, even in the beginning, which I find very interesting. Those little types of stories, or how you can kind of take a piece from it. But one thing I wanted to ask you, like I said, I was reading it, and the arranged marriage in the at the very beginning with John's mom,
Yeah.
Elaine, which I love visual images and seeing this little lady in the big sky rides behind a big desk, and she's all of 100 pounds,
Yes. Yes.
and when I saw
Exactly.
when I saw her picture, it's exactly how I imagined how you described it in the book. Um, But you talk, I think, a little bit about your first meeting with John, and how he shows up hours and hours late, and then he's like, with sunglasses on at the school. So what was it though, about John? They says, this is going to be the guy.
Matthew, he had the guts to ask me out after that disastrous first meeting. And I had to hand it to him. I mean, and seriously, I was in a place where I wasn't interested in meeting anybody. I
Yeah.
had done this as a favor to Elaine. I would go and meet her son. It was going to help me close the deal on this advertising thing. And so I wasn't looking. And so when he called and said, "Can I take you out?" I was like, seriously? And I will tell you, that first date didn't even go. After the initial meeting and we had this first date, he spills the beer on the table and I could care less, but I'm like, okay, I don't think, but he did not give up. And so to his credit, I just, there was something about the fact that he just did not give up. And so I was really taken by that. And of course I loved his mother, and I was like, okay. And I was just really, he was so focused on success and this career that he was building. And yet he was really able to kind of say, okay, this person, you, Rachel, I really enjoy having you
Yeah.
alongside me, and I want you to take this adventure. And I got to tell you, when he said King of Prussia, I was like, Prussia rhymes with Russia.
Yeah.
Where are we going?
You're talking
I
Europe.
had
What is going on?
Yeah, I had no idea. I didn't study that in geography. I had no idea. And so going to Philadelphia, this Mississippi girl headed to Philadelphia, you might as well taken me to a different country. Seriously.
I can imagine. Yeah, then I loved how you talked about going back then, the hairspray hair and the heavy makeup, and it's like growing up in the South. I just know that I know those women, and I can just imagine walking down the streets of Philadelphia in the in the Southern getup.
Yes, exactly. And then having the bird poop on my head
Oh yes,
with all of that hairspray. Oh, it was,
impossible. All right, Rachel, we're going to go ahead and take our next break right here. When we get back, what I wanted to talk about, Rachel, when we get back is, after your marriage with him. And I want to talk a little bit about Ronald, which, is some really, really great stuff in there. Because one part of the book is, as we get to, Ronald and what happened with him is, Elaine, I'm always curious, like Elaine, her perspective on a lot of these things, especially as her sons were going through what they did. So that's what I will talk about. We'll get into that, and we'll get into the ALS diagnosis. Brief to tell people briefly about LS when we get back, but also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. So we'll get right into that when we get back. We have one caller on hold right now. Again, if you want to call in, number 601-879-0002. Caller, I'll get to you in on the break. But just keep it tuned here to the full story on WYAB 103.9. Sasha, you're on the line.
Oh, hi. Thank you. Rachel, I want to ask you, first of all, I loved your book. I thought it was amazing. It made me laugh. It made me cry. It was great. But I did want to ask you, at what point did you realize that you wanted to write a book?
Oh, well, Sasha, that's a great question. I knew that I wanted to tell this story. I knew while I was living it that I wanted to share it. But I think the actual process, like I said earlier, it took me a long time to get to the place where I actually could sit down and concentrate on it. But I kept journals, I kept calendars. I could go back and look at what was happening in my life. I think now, if there's anyone who wants to write a story and share it, there's technology that makes it so much easier. And what I do know is that all of us have probably been told, you should write a book. Your life is so fascinating. So I'm here to encourage you to do it, because it's much easier with technology. Get somebody who, will support you, and get your story out there, because it will affect and hopefully inspire somebody else in whatever they're going through.
Wow, thank you. I'm inspired.
Thank you, Sasha. I'll be waiting to see your book on the bookshelves.
All right, thanks, Sasha.
Thank you.
All right, Rachel. Like I said, I want to now get into some of the the meat and potatoes, as some would say, of the book. And that is so you and John. Like you said, you had two children. You had J3, John the third, and Jake. And you guys had a boat called the Three J's, which I think is just remarkable. Because you guys lived in Minnesota, and that's like the place of lakes, right? In Minnesota, like the place of lakes.
Everywhere you go, there's a lake. And here's what I thought, Matthew. I thought, oh, in the wintertime, nobody will go to the lake. Oh, no. You're on the lake, whether it's frozen or unfrozen. I mean, they set up camps out there. People drive on it. You know, coming from Mississippi, the Ross Barnett Reservoir was all I ever knew. And no, that thing never froze over.
No.
So seeing that, yes, it was all about the lake. And my husband did grow up. His family was into boating. They spent time in Florida and in Maryland, and he knew all about that. So it was a whole new thing for me when he said, you know, Rachel, I'm going to go get a boat, you know, and I'm like, he goes, come with me. I'm like, John, I know nothing about boats, rowboat, towboat, showboat. I know nothing. I said, just get an air conditioner and a bathroom. That would be great.
And he found it, which is
which
is remarkable.
Yeah,
You got
exactly.
the two things that you wanted. He made sure that he made sure to get.
Yes.
But I also like how you talk. Because everybody you talked about, people who get a boat, they say you only buy a boat once because of all the stuff you have to do with it. And I thought it was funny that you mentioned it. But John and the boys seem to love the boat.
They did. It was a great place. They did a lot of bonding. He taught J3 how to dock that thing. And I mean, at a very young age, J3 was able to do that. But boating is a lifestyle, and usually you grow up in it, right? You know how to do it. But it is a lot of, you know, because it's like as soon as you pull out, somebody's like, okay, I'm hungry. What do we have to eat? Or what do we have to drink? And I'm like, we just got here, you know? But it was, I wanted to name the boat Where's Mom? Because, you know, where is she?
Where is Mom?
But it was a wonderful experience. And my boys still love the water.
Yeah.
And Lake Minnetonka is a beautiful place to have a boat. Yes.
Yeah. And that's part of, I think, you know, John, you said, you know, during this, you guys were having his boys, he was always roughhousing with him. He's a very athletic guy. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. He played sports in college. He baseball and football and in high school as well. So that's why when he got this little nagging thing with his foot, he didn't think a whole lot about it until it wasn't resolving itself.
Yeah. And was he trying to hide any of those initial symptoms from you, or was he openly sharing them too? Because I know for a lot of men, it's really tough to show any kind of, especially to your wife or your boys, especially, you know, any of those kind of weaknesses. Was he openly sharing that with you, or was it something that you noticed and asked him about?
No, I had no idea. And here's the thing. So he was seeing a neurologist for a year, and I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
And here's the thing with ALS too, Matthew, is that it can take 1 to 3 years to figure out what's going on.
Really?
There are a lot of people who have it and don't know it. And because it mimics so many other things like MS, or it could just be, you know, something just happening just, you know, sporadically. And so John had a physical scheduled at the Mayo, which everybody knows Mayo is the mothership of anything medical, based there in Rochester. We were fortunate enough to only be a couple hours away. And the doctor handed him this file folder and said, I think you should take this with you when you go to Mayo. And so when he called me and said, I'm coming back home from Mayo, they want you to come with me the next day, I was like, what are you talking about? We had this all lined up. I don't need to go, blah, 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 blah. And then he came home that night, and the kids were already in bed, and I was reading, and he was as white as a ghost. And he said, I have this disease. They think I'm going to die. And I'm like, wait a second. And he said, they think I have ALS. I have ALS. I'm like, what is that? I've never heard of that. And he's like, no, they think I have Lou Gehrig's. And I'm like, well, what is that? I don't know what I don't know what that is either. I'm not a sport, you know. So I will tell you, and that's not unusual either, Matthew, because ALS is still a fairly rare disease. There are only about 30,000 people currently living with it in the United States, between 5 and 6 1,000 people are diagnosed every year. Um, and it is still, they still give you 2 to 5 years,
Mhm.
and they still don't know what causes it, and there's still no known cure.
Yeah, and essentially, for ALS, I'm not a medical person, but for a lot of our listeners who may not be medical people as well, it has something to do with like the nerves, or if your muscles are weakened, or signals aren't going to your nerves or something.
Yes, so it stands for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. And so actually what happens, you have motor neurons that travel from your brain to your muscles, right? Telling your
Mhm.
muscles to move, and they start to die. So
Wow.
what happens is your body starts to self-paralyze. So just imagine you have an itch on your nose. You can't lift your hand to scratch it. You're
Mm.
laying in bed. You can't turn over. And yet your mind stays completely intact. You
Wow.
know exactly what's going on. And so ultimately, Matthew, what happens is because the diaphragm is the muscle that moves our lungs, it quits working. I mean, people get on breathing machines. You can get a feeding tube because it becomes difficult to swallow. Then
Mhm.
you get the lot. Some people get a breathing tube. It's a smaller percentage, and that's ultimately what happens is that you can't breathe anymore.
Yeah, and the scary thing is, I guess the doctors are telling you. I mean, this when you're diagnosed. So it's like,
Mhm.
it's just, most people don't know how they're going to die,
Right.
and then you see this, and he's like, that I'm probably going to suffocate to death, and so when you learn this, I mean, at that point, do you blame God, or do you dive deeper into it? What was your, as far as your faith goes? How did that shake your faith at all when you get this? Is that your husband, this young, very young, virile guy,
Yes.
gets this? Does that make you challenge your faith at all?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, you're in shock for probably months. I will say months. You're in shock, and you're just and then you overwhelm yourself with information. Right? You go to the internet, you Google, you go to the ALS Association. Like, what can I do? What can I do? They're like, yeah, yeah, nothing. But we're
Mhm.
going to try and work with you and make your quality of life as good as we possibly can. I will tell you that yes, my I had a lot of biblical knowledge. I grew up, I knew all the stories of the Bible, I knew all the people in the Bible. Okay, great. But at this point, I went from this religious thing to this relationship with Jesus. And I mean, I just when you are at the end of your rope and have nowhere else to go, you just get on your knees and say, "Okay." And for the longest time, my prayer was, "Lord, I don't know how to do this. I
Mhm.
do not know how to do that. I've never helped anybody die. I've never had anybody, Ronald, who we'll talk about in a little bit,
Yeah.
but I mean, it was like, so I will say that my faith got to a place where it didn't mean I wasn't scared. It didn't mean this was easy. It didn't mean that I liked the answers I was getting. But what it did mean is that I was constantly calling on Jesus to say, help me through this, show me how to do this. And like I said earlier, listening to those messages from the Bible, scriptures, versus people, pastors who were just, I just have to fortify myself because I don't know what this is. I know how the story's going to end, but
Mhm.
I don't know what the journey's going to
And
look
what that
like.
what that process is going to look like.
Mhm.
And so we talked about, we mentioned Ronald there. So in your book, you talk about Ronald, who's John's brother, his
Yes.
younger brother, same age as you, I'm guessing. Ronald,
Yes.
same age as you. Yeah,
Yes.
he went to
Yes.
SMU, um,
Yes.
and he, of course, was diagnosed and eventually was died by another terminal illness, AIDS.
Yes.
And so their mother, this is one thing that just kept running through my mind, was Elaine, because you talk about her so much, and again, she's this character that I, that I have in my head. To have two sons, and she had two sons and a daughter, if I'm correct, right? That was
Yes.
all of them. Um, you know, what was it? I mean, for her, as a mother, to have your two sons both die very young. I think Ronald was 30, like 39 or something.
Yes. You're
Uh,
right. Yes,
um,
Matthew.
and John was in his 40s, or just turned
Yes.
50, just
Just
turned
turned 50. Yes.
50. For her, I mean, did you have those conversations with her, about, because I know she was a big part of your life, but she's over out in California, and you're in Minnesota, obviously. I mean, do you know what it was like for her? Did you guys ever have those discussions about her sons, going through these things?
Well, I think what I've found is for that generation, right? They didn't spend a lot of time talking about things. They just reacted and they just did what had to be done, right? I mean, they don't sit with their feelings like this, like
Yeah,
the newer generations do, right? We don't spend
that's
a lot of time
that's
going,
all we talk about is our
yeah,
feelings for us millennials.
yeah,
Uh,
right. And so what I did know is that Elaine, uh, going through this with Ronald, and I write about it in the book too, about how it was many years later that I finally was able to talk to her about it was like, could because she found him. He died in his sleep and he was at her home and she found him and I write about that in the book because I'd never really been able to go there with her, but I also found John. He
yeah,
passed at
almost the
home, so
exact
we
same way. Yeah,
yeah, we had that shared experience. And so and she was able to talk to me about it, but there's because she had held it for so, they just hold on to these things for
yeah,
so long. And so and then even to talk about it. But yet, what I will tell you is that yesterday would have been Ronald's 63rd birthday. I call her on his birthday. I call her on his passing day. I talk about Ronald and John and her second husband Van, who
yeah,
passed as well, because keeping the memory. What I found too is that yes, initially it may be hard when you're at the initial stages of loss to talk about people because it hurts so much.
hmm
But here we are. 14 years later for John, even longer for Ronald. And I'm like, you know what? I want they were such a big part of my life. They were a huge part of her life, and there's so many good things to remember, right? And while our loved ones may die in horrible death under horrible circumstances, they probably lived a pretty good life, and
yeah.
that's what we want to remember.
To focus that. Um,
Yes.
so there's one, difficult question I want to ask you because, as again, as a lot of the listeners know, I was a prosecutor in the army. I prosecuted mostly a lot of homicides in my later time, and I worked with families all the time. I mean, when you prosecute these crimes, you almost become part of the family. And I've talked about forgiveness in different parts, but
Mhm.
one thing that they always mention you talk about in your book is this idea of God's plan. How can you say that it was God's plan for my daughter or someone to be murdered, or for your husband to have this, to cut down really in the prime of his life.
Yes.
What do you tell someone who struggles with that?
So I think, Matthew, for me, what I believe is that God doesn't make us sick. God doesn't do these things, but He allows us to be tested. And I think about the story of Job.
Hmm.
And I think about how the devil, that God said, you can do anything to him but kill him.
Hmm.
And the devil didn't he? He took away his family, his kids, his wealth, and even his friends were like, "Come on, Job, give it up. This God of yours. I mean, seriously, look at it. Look at where you are. You're sitting in a pile of dirt with sores all over you."
Hmm.
And Job would not. He would not turn against. He didn't know why. He didn't know why all this was happening to him, but he would not turn his back on God. And so I did. I will tell you, I struggled because here's what I thought, Matthew. I
Hmm.
thought if anybody was going to be healed of ALS, if the miracle of the healing, it was going to happen. But
Yeah.
it was going to happen to John
Hmm.
because not because of me or my faith, but just because God can heal anyone of
Yeah.
anything at any time. I do believe that. But
Yeah.
he does. What I do have to say and what I do believe is that look what Jesus went through on our behalf.
Hmm.
Look at what he went through. Who are we to think that we're going to get through this life unscathed?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that may not be what people want to hear. We don't have all the answers to the questions. We may never have them on this side.
Hmm.
And I always am like, oh yeah, when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask about this. Well, I think by the time I get there, I'm going to be so overwhelmed by everything
Yeah.
else. I'm not going to.
That's not going to be the worry.
Yeah,
That's not going to be the worry.
exactly. So those are the things that I like I said, I think he allows us to be tested because that is where our faith, that's where we really have to go in and say, okay, I'm all in. I'm all in, Jesus. I am all in with you. And I know, and I want to remind people too, that Holy Spirit is gifted to us. That is our supernatural superpower that we have, Matthew.
Yeah.
It lives and resides in us as believers. We were gifted with that. Stir it up. so that when you don't know how to handle things, just say, be stirred up in me, handle this for me, because I can't do it right now. I don't
Yeah.
know what to do.
And Rachel, we're going to have to end it pretty soon here, but our time went really quick. But your book, The Widow Chose Red, what I'll do, I'll ask you about that when we're on the break, because we're about to
Okay.
take a bit of hard break. But this is available on Amazon. I have a sticker here. It says #1 Amazon bestseller. I did check it out on Amazon. 5-star reviews, almost all around. I think there's only one 4-star. There's no 1-star reviews. All 5-star reviews there on Amazon. So it's available there. I just checked it. I think it's $15 or something right there on Amazon. You can also get the $19 for the paperback, $3 for the Kindle. You also have
Okay.
a hardcover. It looks like.
I do have a hardcover, and
so-
the audio is on Spotify.
Oh, Spotify as well. All right, we have
Yes.
to take a real hard break. Rachel, I want to talk to you during the break, but we're going to take this hard break right here. All right, sorry about that. Sorry about that, Rachel. We have to take a break right at 55, or it'll it's one of those
Or you'll
things.
be off the air. Okay,
Yeah,
Matthew,
exactly.
no problem. No
Uh,
problem.
but
I'm so impressed with the questions you're asking me. They're terrific.
no, thank you. I did want to just basically my curiosity again. We're still on the live stream. We're not on the FM, but we're still live
Sure.
streaming. So how is J3 and Jake doing now? I know they're both in their 20s at this point, right?
They are, and
Yeah.
that's the second book. The 2nd
Mhm.
book is going to be The Boys, the Battle in the Bible. 28, John J3 is 28. He's got 2 little kids, and lives about an hour away from me. Jake is working for a sports marketing agency in Chicago,
Wow.
and so they are. They have they've had some more struggles, but that's what I'll talk about in the second book. And then the third one is going to talk about how I met Kevin,
Yeah.
God, the guy, and the girls. Yeah.
And Kevin, you guys, so I know you married to Kevin now. When did you guys get married?
We got married 2 years ago at the Sea of Galilee. We took all the kids to
Oh, wow.
Israel, and we're actually married by the pastor that baptized both the boys and that did John's celebration of life.
Oh, wow. That is amazing.
Yeah.
That is absolutely amazing. There's so many things, like I said, I didn't have the chance to cover. One thing I did want to mention, though, what I thought was really good in your book about is advocating for your loved one at the hospital, because I've worked with hospitals as an attorney, and seeing some of the things they do. Sometimes your best interest is not their best interest. I think so
Yes.
many people are scared to, say no. I think they're trying to get some blood, and you're like, no, you don't
Yeah.
need blood. We know what it's got. There's no questions here, right?
Yes.
That common sense that eventually comes to you. And I think that was such a great point in your book to tell people hey, it's okay to stand up to the hospital every once in a while, which
Yes.
I think is so important.
Mm-hmm. You were absolutely right, Matthew. And I wanted to tell you, because you
Yeah.
being the literary critic that you have been,
Yeah.
we were just awarded the Literary Titan Gold Book Award.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
So
Um,
I just got that, like, I think it was just happened just this last week. So I wanted to let you know that, being that you come from that world.
Yeah, that is awesome. And you have a website as well.
I do.
What is your website?
The website is spiritedprosperity.com, and I'm just building a community of women who need support, a place to go. They can come and get information about where I'm going to be speaking, events that I'll be at, and if they want me to come and be a part of their book club, or if I can come to their women's conference, I'm always available to do that, or just join our online community. Happy to be a part.
Absolutely. And will you be coming back to Jackson anytime soon, doing some book signings or anything like that?
You know what, Matthew? I hope so.
Yeah.
As I said, I have my uncle who was just recently diagnosed. He's being treated by the same doctor that treats Steve Gleason in New Orleans. And so my guess is that I'll be back a few more times, and I will definitely keep you posted.
Awesome. All right. Well, Rachel, thank you again for joining us. We're going to hit the break. We're almost out of the FM, but I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us again. I really enjoyed this book. Here's the cover of it again for everybody. The Widow Chose Red, ? Which again I think is it's a great book. It's an entertaining read, and especially the reflection and stuff on there. So again, Rachel, thank you for joining us, and we'll be talking to you soon for your other 2 books.
Oh, Matthew, Godspeed to you and your audience.
Thank you.